Hi everyone, Nicole Spohr here today with my card showcase of pumpkin and jack-o'-lantern die-cut cards featuring the Hero Arts September 2020 My Monthly Hero add-ons. We're going to be creating 3 die-cut cards. They all feature some stamping here and there, whether it's backgrounds or greetings, and then coloring in die cuts that I've die cut from colored cardstock and adding shading with Copic markers. I absolutely love this technique and it works so well with the add-ons this month. We're going to be creating this really pretty autumn bouquet first, coming up out of a pumpkin. I love pumpkin bouquets like this. So here is the finished card, and then I'm going to show you the September add-on products that we're using. So first up, we have got the autumn bouquet. Then we are using the jack-o'-lantern fancy dies. We're going to use the pumpkin top and the pumpkin for this, and a sentiment from the Wheelbarrow friends. Let's get started by die cutting. I did all my die cutting off camera to save us a little bit of time today, and we're going to color in. If I'm repeating any color for additional cards, I am just going to do that off camera to save us a little bit of time, since creating 3 cards does make the video a little bit longer. My first card, or my first pumpkin, pardon, was die cut from some eggshell lawn fawn cardstock, and we're using the jack-o'-lantern fancy dies. We're not going to use the jack-o'-lantern face. I love that you can use it with or without. To me, that makes this so much more versatile, because then you can use this pumpkin for fall themed cards if Halloween is not your thing. You can use them for Thanksgiving maybe, so lots of things to do with that. We're using E40, 43, and 44. I personally love a white pumpkin, and this is my favorite color combination to get that white pumpkin. Then we're going to take the pumpkin, place it in our MISTI, and die cut the Gathered For You sentiment from the Wheelbarrow Friends stamp set. We're going to stamp that with the Hero Arts embossing and watermark ink, and heat emboss with gold embossing powder. I also really love a gold embossed sentiment on this particular color of background. I think it adds an elegant feel. I think this would be a beautiful hostess type card if you are going somewhere for even like a coffee get together in the fall months with your girlfriends, or book club, or Bible study group, or Thanksgiving. Let's say your mother, your mother-in-law, your sister, whoever is hosting, you can take a card and a little gift, and I think this would be really beautiful. Now for the background, I am going to implement a couple of stamps from Simon Says Stamp with my Hero Arts, my monthly hero products. Starting with this Wood Planks background stamp, I've stamped it with some dark chocolate Simon Says Stamp ink. This is a dye ink. And then we're going to take Distress inks in Gathered Twigs and Ground Espresso and create this beautiful wood grain background. It's really going to be dark and rich when it's done. You're basically creating your own wood grain pattern paper. I have loved wood grain pattern paper for years and years. I kind of hoarded it there for a long time, and have kind of slowly used a lot of my favorites up. So when Simon Says Stamp came out with this in their September 1st release for Stamptember, and this is a product that will keep being restocked. It's not an exclusive or anything like that. It's exclusive to Simon, but it's not going to be a limited edition, I guess I should say. I loved it because you can create a wood grain in any color you want. So this is a beautiful, deep, dark, rich brown that we're going to build our scene on. And look how pretty the pumpkin looks against that wood grain. I just love it. Off camera, I have die cut all of the components for my autumn bouquet. We have sunflowers, sunflower stems, other little sprigs that we can add little flowers to, little flowers, leaves, all the things. So we have all of this here, and I am going to take you through how I colored in each of these items. This is one of the parts of the video that you can reference again. You can find the information on my blog if you want to know what color I used. But I'm going to color more leaves, especially, I believe, just the leaves, for my final two cards, and they're all going to be colored just like you're seeing here. The sunflowers are gorgeous. I absolutely love that we have this side view sunflower. It's probably my favorite, even though the front view is beautiful, and I have two of those for the card. I am coloring this with YR 23 and 24, with E57 and 59 for the sunflower center. I live in Kansas, which is known as the sunflower state, so I'm always very, I love a sunflower, and I think that these are gorgeous. I know that my friend Lori Craig also loves the sunflowers, so this is something that I know she would love. So sometimes when I'm making cards, I have a certain person in mind, and I think that I really was thinking about her when I was making this. But I love the dimension the Copic markers or any type of marker can add to your colored cardstock die cuts. One of my very favorite things to do if you want shading, the depth and dimension that you often get when you're coloring in an outline type image or a no line image, but that lacks with flat cardstock images. I love to find a way to add that depth and dimension back in. Now you definitely wouldn't have to use the pumpkin lid here, but I thought it added a fun little touch, just kind of sitting off to the side of our autumn bouquet. So we're going to color that in as well. Because it's from a nice light color of cardstock, very easy to color over the stem of the pumpkin with our dark earth tone markers. You'll see in the jack-o'-lantern card we're creating next, the top of the pumpkin is orange, and it's also very easy to color over. I used mostly about 2 markers per color family. That's about it. I don't think I used 3 anywhere except for the pumpkin. And in any of the pumpkins, I did use more than just the 2 markers. But everything else, I think I kept it mostly to 2 or 3 markers. I know I've been asked quite a bit lately in comments about choosing the markers and getting your shading and all of those things. And my answer to that is something that I still do daily. Practice, practice, practice. Coloring and using any of your tools, whether it be markers or colored pencils, ink blending, anything like that. It all just takes practice, and that is part of the beauty and fun of crafting, I think, is that when our practice results in, success and improvement. And I definitely see those things even in myself. So we all, as creators and makers, are continuously working to hone our craft and find the things that work for us. And I really find that exciting. Adding only 1 color to these little flowers. They're pretty small, so I'm just adding a little shading from the center out. We're going to be using some Nuvo crystal drops to decorate the center, so I'm not too worried about that. And then these little sprigs of, I don't know exactly what they are. I mean, I think they could be used to create wheat, but this isn't really the season for wheat. But I think they're beautiful and a nice little addition to the bouquet. So I die cut those from eggshell cardstock, speckled eggshell cardstock, and used the same colors as the pumpkin to add a little shading. And then we've got some orange flowers. Definitely I kind of thought of the little flowers as mums. And so I tried to pick like deep dark reds, orange, and deep plum to add in some color to our beautiful bouquet. We are going to pop up then the pumpkin on our wood plank background with foam adhesive squares. And then we're going to tuck in some leaves and things down near the base and then build our bouquet. I use minimal liquid glue. These are pretty fine die cuts, so I highly recommend probably using a liquid glue just because it makes it easy. But I'm going to show you that for stems, I place liquid glue only back behind the stem, not the leaves. That's going to allow me to easily bend and place and honestly do a floral arrangement bouquet on paper where I can still tuck things here and there. You're going to notice the sunflowers are not going to go in until about probably halfway through the arrangement, even though I've got my stems in place. And that is on purpose. Those are adhered with foam adhesive, but those are also going to give us our height, and then also the little, let's just call them wheat sprigs. I don't even know if that's, or the wheat, but I don't know if that's exactly what they're supposed to be. But that, for the purpose of this video, that's what I'm going to call them. I have 3. You will notice in the finished video, there's actually 6. So I put these 3 in here and I immediately was like, yeah, that's not enough. So I did go back. I believe I went back off camera and added those in. I even added the little raffia bow because what a fun little accent. And then we're adding in all the little flowers. Some of the little flowers are adhered with foam adhesive, some aren't. It really just depended on how they fit into the floral bouquet. Then I have Nouveau crystal drops in the same colors as the little flowers. So those little sprigs that I've attached those to, I kind of made little buds, if you will, so that there's going to be more blooming flowers coming from those, and then added some green to the center of the blooms to finish that off. And then of course in the finished card, you'll notice there's 6 of those taller sprigs, which really just makes the floral arrangement come to life. So our next card is going to be a spooky Halloween card featuring a jack-o'-lantern and a pumpkin. And this time we are going to use a Hero Arts fancy die as the background and add ink blending to that spiderweb background, which I really felt like was the perfect accent. So the products we're going to be using for this card are the spiderweb texture fancy die. That's the background. Then of course our jack-o'-lantern fancy die. We're going to use everything from this for our card today. We're going to use a sentiment from the Color Layering Moonlit Night, some leaves from the Autumn Bouquet, and then this little bird we're going to use as a crow. This is from the August add-ons, and this is the Birdhouse Fancy Die. So I thought that adding a little crow standing on one of the pumpkins would be really add into that spooky feeling. So definitely don't be afraid to kind of go back and revisit your past add-ons and pull them in with your new products you're picking up. I have die cut the spiderweb texture background out of smooth white cardstock, and I'm going to be adding some color then with Wilted Violet, Chip Sapphire, and Black Soot Distress inks. I'm using the regular distress inks here and not the oxides. I wanted a little bit more of an intense background, and I'm going to work to really get that spooky type of feel for my background. You will also notice in today's videos, all of the backgrounds are some sort of ink blending or stamping and ink blending or embossing and embossed resist with ink blending. I really focused on kind of tying it all together with beautiful ink blended backgrounds and then our color and shaded images for our cards. Once we have our background blended the way we want it to look, I am going to spritz it with water from a distress sprayer and let those water droplets do their thing and create the magic. I really think it adds to the magical feeling of the finished card. Our jack-o'-lantern fancy die this time was die cut from some canned pumpkin lawn fawn cardstock and we're shading it in with some orange and brown markers to give it that wonderful texture here. The browns shaded with the yellow reds or the oranges really works to build that beautiful depth and dimension. I die cut the face from this orange pumpkin, and we're going to layer it over the black die cut. You could also die cut the face pieces from black cardstock and glue them down if you wanted to. Look at what a difference adding that little bit of shading into our jack-o'-lantern makes. And I think it looks amazing against this background. Really, really love that. As I mentioned when I was coloring the stem on the previous card, we're going to use E57 and 59 for this one, and then color the top of this pumpkin as well. Something I haven't mentioned yet that I think I probably should is I am not blending my Copics as much as I normally would for a colored image, like an outline image. For these, I really want the texture. I do not want to blend out the lines too terrible much. And so I'm kind of doing a flicking and feathering motion rather than blending. You'll notice that I've added in some leaves and another pumpkin colored just like the first card. This candle from the jack-o'-lantern set was die cut from Hero Art's Canary cardstock, and I purposely picked a light yellow so that I could add to the flame at the top, but that I could take dark markers and color in the candle itself and change the color. So in this case, we're using red violets in 69 and 66 for a deep, dark pinky purple. Then the Birdhouse Fancy Die was die cut from a slate gray cardstock, and we're going to feather in until we get the black we want for our crow using some warm gray markers. And I'm going to have to work a little bit to get that shading how I want it to look. And I'm even going to draw in a little wing on the body. There we go. And we'll shade that in as well. We'll be using Nuvo Crystal Drops in Ebony Black to add in the glossy black eye. I think a black gemstone would be fun as well. On the background, we are going to be stamping a color layering Moonlit Night sentiment, "You're wicked cool," right on the background. Even though our background has the spider web detail, I went ahead and stamped it right on there with my Hero Arts embossing and watermark ink, and we're sprinkling on white embossing powder. For this technique to work, you want to make sure your distress inked background is completely dry before you stamp and emboss. Otherwise, your embossing powder could stick where you don't want it to, which won't really work for this. Kind of ruin the look of the design. But look how pretty that white embossing looks against this beautiful, dark, spooky background. We're ready to put everything together now, starting with layering our jack-o'-lantern. We're going to adhere the white pumpkin directly to the card base with the candle sticking out of it. And then we'll pop up our jack-o'-lantern with foam adhesive. And we'll pop up the jack-o'-lantern lid, a couple of leaves, and the crow. And then we're going to tuck the rest of the leaves down near the base of the pumpkins. Again, all of those leaves are from our Autumn Bouquet Fancy Die, and were colored with the same Copic marker colors that I used for the previous card. Once we have all of our pieces in place here, I am going to take some pretty Pink Posh mini star confetti, and we are going to scatter those throughout our spiderweb sky here for a beautiful touch of spooky sparkle. I thought they just finished off this so beautifully. There's a lot of white space up high, and I liked the addition of a little tiny bit of sparkle up there in the sky. And I'm using an embellishment wand to easily pick those pieces up and put them in place where I want them to go. And I added quite a few of these. I would add a few and take a step back, add a few more, take a step back, and I ended up adding quite a few of these because I really liked how they looked. We'll place this on a white top fold card base, and our second card featuring a jack-o'-lantern and pumpkin are all finished. Finally, we are going to be using the pumpkin window die for our final card, plus the September word fancy die with some additional leaves, and put it all on a bright blue crackle background that I think really shows off the beautiful autumn colors. So I love the addition of these deep dark blues with the oranges and yellows and greens and reds. We're going to be using the following from the September release. So there's the finished card. We're going to be using again the Autumn Bouquet fancy dies for the leaves. We're going to be using the color layering Moonlit Night Greeting Hello There. The September word fancy die, which is really beautiful with those little leaves. And the pumpkin window die, which can be used in lots of different ways. I think it would make really fun shakers as well. I'm going to use it more kind of like I've used the other products, but it's definitely a fun one. This is another card where I'm going to pull in a background stamp from Simon Says Stamp. This is the Crackle Background, which is my favorite. I absolutely love this. And we are going to stamp this Crackle background on some smooth white cardstock with clear embossing and watermark ink from Hero Arts, and use our Hero Arts gold embossing powder to heat set a gold design, which gives a little bit of that fall elegance, I think, to this card. Then we're going to ink blend Speckled Egg and Chipped Sapphire Distress inks. Again, I'm using the Distress inks and not the oxides to add color to our panel. First on the Speckled Egg, and then all the way around the edges of our panel, we'll be adding Chipped Sapphire. So it's mostly lighter in the center and darker out around the edges. I'm going to make sure and take a dry cloth or a dry paper towel and buff away any of the excess ink sitting on top of this so that the gold embossing really shines through. Off camera, I have die cut the pumpkin window die from a couple colors of cardstock, and I've cut 3 layers of the September word fancy die, and we're going to color them all in just like we did. So the September is actually die cut from white cardstock that we're going to completely discolor, and our pumpkin window is die cut from a couple of shades of cardstock. And I went ahead and temporarily taped them together with Post-it tape so that I could add shading to not only the outline, but to each panel piece for my pumpkin. We're using YR 24, 27, and E57 and 59 for shading in the pumpkin. I started with the orange panel pieces first, and then I will do the outline. And I ended up saving, I had die cut the pumpkin from a couple, actually several different colors of cardstock. And I kept some of those other pieces because we're going to give it a little dimension, and you'll see that when I go to assemble the card. I'm going to do the same thing for the stem, where I use Post-it tape to inlay that in while I'm coloring. It helps hold everything down temporarily. And we're going to shade in the pumpkin stem with our darker brown markers and even pull in a little E55. And there is our pumpkin. Look how pretty that big orange pumpkin is going to look on the blue Crackle background. Next, I want to go ahead and die cut the September from several three times from white heavyweight cardstock, at least for one of those layers. And I think I did all three just so they have a nice stability. This is a 110-pound Nina. And then we're coloring these in with Copic markers with B34, 37, and 39 for the word September, which these colors really tie into the Crackle background beautifully. And then for our leaves, we're going to do combinations of yellows, orange, reds, and greens. Anything that you've seen before, probably going to hit here. And this is just going to give that September a nice little look. I really like these fancy dies. I think they're a great opportunity to color them yourself with markers or your favorite coloring medium and really add some fun little touches. We'll add just a little bit more coloring here. And then we're going to glue these one on top of another. I have 2 more layers from heavyweight 110-pound cardstock that I'm going to glue one on top of another so it has more of a substantial look and feel to it. So I'll just carefully pop this out. It was much easier to color while it was still kind of stuck in the cardstock, and so I just left it there after I die cut it. While my pumpkin is still attached to the Post-it tape, I am going to take the Hello There sentiment from the Color Layering Moonlit Night stamp set and stamp that in the center of the pumpkin with the embossing and watermark ink and heat emboss with white embossing powder. This is because it does slightly overlap one of the dividers of the pumpkin, and I want it to stamp as flat as possible, which you'll see why here in a second. And I'm making sure all of those layers are lined up perfectly. I don't want any of them to be shifted, and then when I go to adhere these to my card to find out that the letter doesn't line up. Again, using a powder tool, help hold the embossing powder only to our stamped sentiment and not to anything else. And I like how the sentiment will read, Hello There September. So maybe you know someone with September birthdays. I have several in my family for sure, as well as some friends. So I think that you could definitely add a birthday sentiment on the inside, or maybe you just want to send, you know, a thank you or whatever it might be. This would work for many different occasions. And also, I think you could use this for your scrapbooking or project life, all kinds of things. If you also do some of those types of paper crafting, or even frame it up for decor in your house. So here is my outline, and I'm actually going to take another layer of pieces that I had, and we're going to glue the outline down first using a little liquid glue. We're going to inlay some leftover pieces, whatever color that might be. I couldn't find the brown ones. Obviously, I die cut them, so there had to have been brown pieces somewhere, but I don't know where they went. And I'm going to inlay those in first, and then I'm going to pop the orange pieces on top. And that tiny little step gives each of the panels of your pumpkin dimension, which is so super cool. With this particular pumpkin, you can actually get that dimension without just the coloring. And a couple of the panels I put in upside down, I noticed, and so I'm working really quickly. I know I've sped up the video, but I did work quickly. Thank goodness, otherwise they would have been glued in wrong. Look how pretty this pumpkin is. We're going to do the same thing for the stem and inlay a piece in there first, and then pop in the stem piece so it's slightly raised. And we're also going to tuck leaves around the base of our pumpkin, about 3 on one side, 1 on the other. The other 2 leaves will be tucked up near the stem. And then the word September is going to be down along the bottom edge. This is a lot of liquid glue. My best tip for this is I have acrylic blocks laying around. I don't use them tons for stamping anymore. There are times I still do, but they work fantastic for holding down pieces and elements on cards while liquid glue dries so that it dries completely flat. And I did work pretty fast here to kind of get everything glued down in place, but I had it all ready to go, which is my favorite thing to do. We're going to finish by adding a scattering of Nouveau crystal drops in several colors. So we've got like some oranges and golds and greens and red, just a small scattering, not a ton, but I think it adds a nice little bit of interest to the card. And then we're even going to add a couple of cute little coffee bean is the technical color for these, but little brown hearts down below the September. And I played around with the placement, but I ended up choosing down there below, and we will just use a little dab of Ranger Multi-Matte Medium to get those glued down in place. So I'm using the embellishment wand again to easily pick those up and put those teeny tiny little hearts down. We will glue this panel to a white top fold card base, and our trio of pumpkin die cut cards is all finished. Thank you guys so much for joining me today for this card showcase featuring My Monthly Hero September 2020 add-ons. The supplies I used to create my cards are listed and linked below the video here on YouTube. Here are a couple more videos featuring Hero Art's My Monthly Hero products that you might be interested in. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and be sure to subscribe to my channel and hit that notification bell to never miss a new card making video. Thank you so much for joining me today, and we'll catch you next time.